think it was program admittance. It was kind of a vague category that had been asked about what do we mean by that? And I got some clarity around that. It does not mean the OAYRF or the ranch or YOTP. That field indicates it is a group home. So last month there were a couple of admittances to a group home, and that's why I believe that the average number of days was substantially longer than it is here this month, where you can see for the ranch there were 3 individuals, and the average number of days between disposition date and date of entry was 8, and YOTP for that one individual was 2 days. Okay, so again, this is no different than what we've provided for you in the past. Now, if you go to the next page, page 8 through 10, this is new information that you had asked of us last week that that Melvin was supportive enough to help us obtain. But basically, this speaks to the charges for each of those individuals. Now, I'm not sure if you have pulled up your copy online. I actually have a hard copy, but if you look at your copy online, you'll see the PID column is the first column on the far left. There are a number of repeats. So for PID number 1, that is youth number 1, okay, this individual had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 arresting charges. Okay, you can see the arresting charges in the 3rd column, the description of that charge, as well as the petition charges. Okay, and from everything I can tell, it looks like the petition charges are the same as the arrest charge for this for this individual. You can go down further. Youth 2 and Youth 3, each of them had just 1 charge, arresting charge, that were both petitioned. Now, youth number 4 is has 4 arresting charges, but there's only 1 charge that was petitioned for evading. The other 3 charges were not pursued. Okay. 5 is an FTA, that's a courtesy hold. Youth 6, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Again, this youth has 8 charges. All of them were petitioned. No change or reduction in those charges. Youth 7, this posed a little bit of a trick for me. The circumstances at the ranch changed. It looks like it was medical, so there are no charges that were petitioned here. Okay. Some of the other NAs, or if there is no petition charge, it's either medical or it's the charges haven't been pursued further. So you can see the other one that would stand out would be youth number 12 for 4 charges related to carjacking, evading the police, conspiracy. Only the carjacking charge was pursued. The other 3 were not. So this will give you, I don't want to go through all of them specifically, but you can take a look at them and get a sense of what's going on. I haven't quite figured out how to summarize this in the best way to say, oh, this individual, all charges were petitioned as arrested, or how to even think about it. But it's something that we might want to do is, take a look at that and see what makes the most sense Certainly, I don't think the count of the charges makes any sense because the severity is such a big factor there.
Well, first, I just want to say that this is really amazing, like just the level of detail. And thank you guys so much for providing this. I think that for a really long time, from my perspective, this is kind of like what we've been really would be our hope is to be able to have this amount of information. So I really appreciate probation providing it, and Denise, you taking the time to put it into a format that we can look at it. Any other committee members have any comments or questions?
Melvin, have I represented this correctly? Okay, great, thank you. Any other specific questions surrounding this? Okay.
I have one question. So like,
Sure.
I know that in the past, sometimes kids have, like the the medical charge, change of circumstances from the ranch has sometimes been because of like a medication or because of an allergy or something like that, or just a kid who needs medical because there's not the same level of medical support out there at the ranch. Is that what those are looking like?
Yeah, pretty much. From anything from, bee allergies to medication, a new assessment, or kid could be complaining about something and we take them to emergency, and then before they get cleared back out to the ranch, they got to go into juvenile hall. So it could be a number of different factors for the 778s.
Yeah, I think that's just helpful context because, for people who aren't familiar with the different settings, it looks like they're having some kind of major medical emergency out there, but that's
right.
Not really.
And Melvin, could you speak to the other one for youth 10 and 11? They too had medical, but it looks like they had probation violations there. What kind of circumstance would that be? That would be page 9, towards the bottom.
It could be a number of things. I mean, you can have a change of circumstance and a probation violation, filed at the same time. I would have to look at the actual filing to determine why was it filed? Was it a mistake as a 778 or 777, or was it both? But normally it's rare that you would see both.
Okay.
I see we can open it up for some comment and questions. And Jonathan, I see you have your hand raised.
This is great, Denise. Just a quick question. So by intakes, is this referring exclusively to the number of youth who were booked at juvenile hall? In other words, it's not capturing out of custody referrals to probation. These are custodial referrals where there was actually a juvenile hall booking. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct.
Any other questions or comments from the public?
Okay. I'd like to move on then to page 11, 12, and 13. Now, this is, these are snapshots, basically, descriptive snapshots of the data that our office provides to the Department of Justice on juveniles. And this data set that I have access to basically goes through August 2020, so I would encourage you not to look at any of the August numbers, not only for COVID, but because that year is incomplete. But what you can see is on the first table for cohort by sex, cohort refers to the year that the referral was made. Okay, and what we can see is between 2019 and 2016, if you look at the far right total for each of those cohorts, you can see that the number of referrals has decreased between 2016 and 2019. So in 2016, we had over 1,800 referrals. In 2019, we had 1,400. So that's a drop of some 20%. Okay, you can also see here that there is a distribution by gender that I don't think is any surprise, with almost 3/4 of the referrals being of men and about 1/4 of women. Okay, and that seems to be pretty consistent across each year of referral. When we go to the next page, which is page 12, this reflects the race and ethnicity distribution by referral year. And this is what's, meaningful information for this body. What you can see is that consistently across every single cohort year, that there is a disproportionate number of Black youth. Okay, and to the point that the average is 47%, whereas the population in the county is 8%. So it's 4 times higher than the general population of the county. The Latinx population overall is about 28%. I think that's slightly higher than the general population. But obviously, as we would expect, the white youth population is much underrepresented. The Asian population, I think, is maybe slightly higher, but fairly within the range of, the norm. But fundamentally, what you see is that in 2019, 18, 17, and 16, over 40%, over 4 out of 10, sometimes half of the referrals are among Black youth. Okay, and again, that's a trend that has basically not changed. Okay. The next page shows the average age at first referral, and consistently it's roughly about 15 years of age, give or take a year or two here and there. Does anybody have any question about these results? This is data now that that our office will have regular access to. Melvin and I are still working to better understand the data, the source of the data surrounding some of the other aspects of it that speak to the offenses and the dispositions. That's why we have not shared any of that with you today. But I did want to give you a sense of, the demographics. We will continue to sink our teeth into this, and I have made a request to have this data base updated so that it goes through the end of 2020, which would be helpful, I think, for us. And we could then start looking at, basically graphing these as trends and doing some other kinds of work with this data to help, support what's going on as a process. But anyway, so we're moving in that direction. The following pages now are.
Denise, can you just pause for a minute? Because I think I do have a couple questions. And I think
Oh, sure, of course,
a lot to
please.
kind of process.
I get into the weeds too fast, so please.
No, it's
slow me down.
It's great. We have a lot to look at here. On page 11, when you have the cohort data,
Yes.
I'm just curious, is that like if somebody is detained multiple times, do they show up as multiple people, or is it unique like encounters, or is it like unique individuals?
Okay, so this is this is based upon the juvenile. So it's not encounters, or.
So if somebody's incarcerated multiple times, they just show up once?
No, just once.
Mm-hmm.
So, and I'll tell you more about that next, because this data is structured in a rather unique way that allows us to look at the demographics by individual as opposed by number of referrals.
Great.
So what that would mean would be, we probably had in 2019, this shows 1,401. This is actually youth now who've been referred. That doesn't mean we had that many referrals, and I think I probably misspoke there. That is not 1,401 referrals, that is 1,401 individual youth. Some of those may have been referred multiple times. Okay.
And then on page 12, when you are comparing the percentage of the population to the percent of the total, what you call the total,
Yep.
are you looking at the total population distribution? Are you looking at the age band? Because there's a difference, if that makes sense. Like, especially like in the Latino population, their number is, because they have more individuals who are younger, they make up a larger proportion of the youth than in their overall population.
This is not by age group, so this is by year and race only.
Okay.
And I have not broken it down any further to, look at it in that way, because the other thing is as you can see, when you go into some of the years for some of the race and ethnicity groups, you can get some pretty small numbers there.
Mhm.
So I'm just trying to be watchful of that as well.
I would just say
But
that
it's a really good point.
Yeah, the reason why it stuck out to me is just because I have, like, internally, we've done our own calculation of this, just when I do the numbers of disproportionality in our overall reporting for the school. And what I have used as a comparison is all the high school enrollment, which also wouldn't be a totally accurate, honestly, because if there are people who are not enrolled in any school, then they're not going to show up either. But, that is a fairly good snapshot of the different proportions of the different groups in the high school age group. So it's just something to
Okay.
consider, because it is pretty significant in certain populations, the difference between the overall population and the youth. So
It's interesting that you bring that up about age. I did not share with you the age distribution because I'm still looking into it. But there were a good, well, this speaks to a mean age. There were some youth that were really young. I mean, like 7-year-olds. And that was, shocking to me. We haven't had a chance, and I haven't had a chance to sort of sink into that and understand that better. And that's why I haven't brought it forward. But there were a good number, I don't know, I want to say around 50 youth that were under 10. So trying to understand, well, how did they get here? What is it? What do we know about this? And so that's just raised some questions about the validity of some of this data that we're looking into. Although I would say, again, this is data that we report to the DOJ. So on some level, we're responsible to that level of reporting. I just don't happen to understand it well enough, and we need to go back and sort of unpack some of that to better understand it before we bring it forward to you.
Well,
So-
I'm pretty sure that, and I've worked in this system since 2016, and I've never seen a 7-year-old in juvenile hall. So I'm thinking the ancient past that might have happened, but those people are handled, I think, by CFS at this point. Is that right, Melvin? If there's a student who's less than 12 years old, they're not coming into juvenile hall.
Yeah, so,
And there's
Correct.
no statutory, like you have to be 12 for juvenile court to have jurisdiction now. That's a statutory change over the
Yeah,
last few years.
okay.
But even since 2016, I can't recall seeing somebody who was under the age of 12 in juvenile hall.
But now these are not, this data is different than the data that I shared before. So these are not, these are youth that would not necessarily be, forgive me for the language here, I'm not quite sure technically what it is, but they don't necessarily go to that next stage of the referral. They could maybe be be brought to the attention, but not pursue, they don't go to court, they don't, go through all that process. So, many are just going home because, they're maybe coming into the office or the hall because they can't identify a parent. So those kinds of things, and those kids are showing up, and maybe that's what these are. But again, I don't yet have a firm enough grip on the data structure to fully understand this yet.
Does any other committee member have any question about these pages between 11 and 13? Questions or comments? So this, like you said, Denise, this group of between 13 and 11 and 13 is not necessarily people who are brought into custody.
All of these are not necessarily youth brought into custody.
Well, the ones that you showed us before on the beginning pages, these ones have
That was,
yeah.
yes. The graphic ones, those are actual intakes for the month. This is, longer term data for a different population of individuals that we're required to report on to DOJ.
So it just means a contact then with some kind of contact. That's all it is.
Yes, that's how I am in understanding it. And
Okay.
then I can sort it out. When we go into the next pages, we'll speak to how the data is structured, what the offenses are, what the dispositions are, and I can start further unpacking that. But at this point, this is just, as you say it, Bill, it's just contact. And a good number of them are not detained.
Okay.
Very good number of them. Obviously, we don't have 1,400 youth
Right.
in custody right now. So,
Or even that pass through custody within a year.
yeah.
Great. Any other comments or questions from committee members or the public? Okay, you want to move to the next set, Denise?
Okay. So the next set of pages speaks to the data and the structure that the county reports to the state for juveniles. And basically there are 4 types of structures. There's the juvenile structure itself that has information surrounding the characteristics of the youth, the demographic characteristics. And so you look down, if you look on page 14, the top underline is the juvenile data structure. These are the field names of all the data that is contained in this spreadsheet or in this data set that we use. So, we've got personal identifying information, we've got birth date, we've got age at first referral, sex, and race. Whether or not the record's been sealed, gang registration, things along those lines. Although I have not seen any in this record or this data to date, any record that has been sealed in this data set or any gang registration, and just my preliminary look. So I don't know that data is, used, but it's a field that's there. So then what we have, after we have that identifying information surrounding the youth, we have the juvenile offense data structure. And then this speaks to the offenses or the charges for the youth. And we could have basically multiple charges per youth. And we have the juvenile ID, which is the link back to, some of that demographic information. And then we have a referral ID, but we have the offense number, the statute, the charge type, things along those lines that are related to each of the charges that the youth was arrested for. The offense data structure then speaks to the details on the individual charges. Okay, and so what this also has, which I appreciate, is a hierarchy code here so that we can look at, you know, I can look at the highest severity charge for each youth if there are multiple charges. That's one way of looking at that. And then finally, the referrals data structure speaks to the referral for the individual and the referral date, the action that was taken, whether the youth went to court, what the outcome of that was, whether the case was terminated, whether the youth was detained or not. Yeah. So this is a lot of data to wrap your head around. It's a lot for me to wrap my head around. I am still trying to, you know, get my head wrapped around the language for juveniles and how it compares to adults, but I'm also trying to wrap my head around what's the most efficient way to look at some of this data once I get a handle on some of these question marks with regard to, you know, what's going on with the 7-year-olds. Then I can start unpacking this a little further, structuring the data in a way that will allow us to say, well, what is the average number of charges per youth? How many, you know, how many times are youth coming back in and sort of cycling in or not? But I'm not ready for that at this point. And I wish I could say, if you have any questions about the fields, let me know, but I'm kind of a newbie and I defer to Melvin on that one.
Well, luckily Melvin is here. So.
I know, I'm counting on that one. So anyway, does anybody have any questions about this?
Back to the original tables on intake. Define for me now what an intake is. Intake means you're going into a residential?
Well, you've actually had contact and you've been referred to probation.
Are you talking about this one, Dr. Walker, or are you talking about in
Yes.
the?
I'm talking about the ones back on page 5.
Right, right. Those are actual intakes
Into custody.
into custody, yes, that's
Into
correct. But prior to a court, you know, kind of assessment.
And that's different from the list of contacts, or is that the same?
It's different.
Different.
The contacts are going to be a lot more of them, obviously, a lot more.
Okay.
It's a little, it's, there's quite a lot of like lingo. I know I'm always having to kind of like figure this out. I kind of had the same question looking at the file structure here. Like you said, the first one, the juvenile data structure is just like the kind of like demographic record, right?
Right.
Like that's who the individual is.
Yes.
And then the offense data, is that what the juvenile offense data structure, the next set of codes, is that about what was filed on? Or that's
So,
how they were detained?
well, no, this would be the offenses that were charged, as
Okay.
I understand it, by referral. So if you have a youth that's come through, has 2 charges filed on one referral, and then goes through a process and is detained and then terminated, and then you have a follow-up referral at a later time with additional charges, that youth is going to show up multiple times with multiple referral IDs in this same data set. The juvenile ID will be the same, but the offenses presumably and the referral ID will be different. And there will be multiple of this, yeah, and this does not speak to the actions.
Does the next section speak to the actions then,
The
or no?
next section does speak to the action, and that would be, well, actually, the last one that speaks to referrals. So that will give you a sense of, okay, this, we have a referral here. Is the referral to court, what are the action types there?
And the one in
And the
between
date
that
of the
offense
action.
data structure is like the detail of each of the potential, if
Of
there are
each of the
multiple
individual
ones.
charges, right. So that will, fundamentally, the way I see using that is to get a sense of the severity of the charge, get a sense of the hierarchy of the charge if there are multiple charges. But, you know, that is offense specific. And really, as you'll notice, it doesn't have a juvenile ID code in there.
So does every person who is part of the data set with the 1,400 people on
Yes,
on this one, on
yes,
11,
yes,
they have a file?
yes. They have a juvenile record, a juvenile data structure record. They also have a juvenile offense data structure record, as well as, they have one of each of these, at least one of each of these.
Even if the outcome was not that they were detained?
Yes, because we'll have an action that the court will say, you know, terminate, or it's no detention. And that action will be in the referral record.
So Melvin, is that the outcome of the detention hearing, or is it even before that? Does it include people?
It could be before that. So we could get a referral, you know, minors arrested for, say, petty theft or whatever. It comes over to us, and the action that we take is a close and intake. And so then when we process and send that over, it'll show us that, or you'll get someone that, hey, this person actually made it into custody, say for 10851. And the DA decides not to file charges. So then it goes to court, and then the court action is no charges filed, minor release, no charges filed, or they file the charges, and then you have your disposition.
So that these records are really then very complete of showing the contacts, every contact with probation through the process, all the way through disposition.
Yeah, I wouldn't, go ahead, Melvin.
No, go ahead.
Well, I was gonna say, I'm not sure that it shows every contact with probation, but I would say that it touches on all those key decision points
Right.
in the process. And we have similar data, not quite like this and not quite structured like this for adults as well. So, but it does touch on, you know, the arrest and the petition and the outcome, and then what happens when the individual is on probation or at home. How is the probation terminated? Successful or unsuccessful, we can speak about that as well. So, but it's not in any ways intended to be something that speaks to all the contact that probation has had with the youth.
Melvin, did you want to add anything to that?
No, I was just reading Jonathan's question in the chat.
Yeah.
Oh,
So Jonathan asked if does the data include law enforcement contact that does not result in a probation referral? For example, if a youth is picked up by the Richmond PD and is referred to RPAL as a diversion, is that registered in here?
you know, I think it might be. I'm not certain yet, and I don't want to affirmatively go that route, but, or I think it could, but I'm not sure yet.
Yeah, if I had to take a guess, I want to say that local PD, they have to report stuff, arrest records and things as well, because that
Yeah.
1,400 referrals or 1,400 individuals, I would assume that encompasses the entire county.
Great. Does any other committee member have any more questions about the file structure? Or members of the public?
We have a
Jonathan, are you asking does who report directly to DOJ or to probation?
Yeah, I was just asking about this concept of if there's law enforcement contact that doesn't result in a probation referral. I think you were saying you think that gets reported. I'm just curious, does the
Yeah.
agency report that to DOJ, or does the agency report it to probation, who in turn reports it to DOJ?
We only report the stuff that comes through our office.
Right.
But this is the extraction of the records that have been submitted, not just what you submitted, correct? So this would include that. Meaning like this is not what you submitted to DOJ, this is extracted from what DOJ received, or is it the other way?
Oh, good question. We extract from DOJ.
So it would
And
include
so
anything that the
it-
police
it
directly.
May very
reported.
well, yeah. Yeah. So, and that's what is gonna take a little, well, it doesn't take that awful much time, but it takes a day or so to go through the process to download the data from DOJ for the youth. So, yeah.
That might explain, I wonder if that explains some of those very young people, because if that includes, a youth who was contacted by the police, like on the street, like a kid who's lost or something like that might be
Right.
put it in there.
Well, and I can certainly, one of the things I can do on those really young kids is to look at who the agency is.
Mhm.
So
Oh,
that
right, because that's
would
one of the
help too,
fields.
because we
Yeah.
have that's in the referral information. So that will help unpack it, but
That's, I think, a pretty comprehensive data set, really. If it sounds like it, it's what you guys are explaining, it sounds like it. Emily,
Yeah.
do you want to say something?
Yes, can I, as a member of the public, I'm much more used to looking at educational data, being a teacher, but I was trying to look through these various charts and graphs and kind of follow the flow of data to see if the racial disparities, whether or not there was a change, whether or not the disparities widened or they lessened, to try to understand, like through the various contacts these youth have, to see whether or not at that point there was then a potential for alternative approaches, right, to address the racial disparities. But it seems to me that these different data sets, they can't be compared like that. And that was my question, because I see like the pie charts in the first couple of pages are for a specific amount of time, and then other data sets are for a larger amount of time. And so it's like comparing apples and oranges, is it right? Am I?
Yeah, definitely, because the pie charts and all of that is just only a single month.
Right.
So, but also I think that you are intuiting where our agenda is going to take us next, which is like Denise has applied some mathematical magic to do exactly what you're talking about. So I think maybe check back in when we get to that part and ask questions there, because we do have some things to report about that part as well.
Okay, thank you.
Anybody else have anything at this time before we move to the next thing?
I'll just chime in to say, first of all, thanks, Denise, for all the hard work on top of everything else that you have to do to try to help us make some sense of, these numbers. These are the figures that we ask for, and then we have to sift through them and try to make sense of them and interpret them to figure out what to do.
right.
So we really appreciate that. We're glad to have a place to start. We know that there's more to come and more detail. I think as some more of those sort of queries, as well as some more information is gathered and is ready to be shared, I think this conversation probably gets a lot more involved. For a lot of you, we probably want to know things like what are the most common offense types, or, where are the most common, places where youth are from who are going into the system, and those sorts of things, so that we can begin to start talking about what to do next.
Right.
And at that point quite yet, that's coming, but we're going to be patient and appreciate the data that we get as it comes in. And if we keep doing this, I think at least the one thing you can look forward to is you guys will be so used to looking at this and sort of deciphering what these things mean that by the time we're ready to
I'll
start.
be without a job. You guys can take it over.
I'm not going that far. I'm just saying you will be used to looking at it to the point you'll be able to get some of the insights on your own, right? You'll be able to look at what's presented to you and start to connect some dots. And that's a very powerful place, I think, for this group to be, and hopefully even the public as we get to dashboards and all of that sort of thing at some point in the future as well. So glad to have this data. Glad to be able to see what we can intuit from it now, and looking forward to seeing what we'll be able to do with it in the future.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Thanks, Chris. I really appreciate your comments, and it is sort of segues right into, you know, a request that I would have from this body is to think about what those next questions are so that I can then prioritize my understanding of the data and the cleaning and the structure of it. If there's a specific place that is, you know, the top priority, well, then I will focus there. Otherwise, I'm just doing it based upon what I think you want, and I think it makes more sense to have you directly say these are the priorities.
Yeah, I think it's going to take a little bit of time for us all to process what, I mean, this is like, you know, unwrapping
Absolutely.
a really, really complicated Lego set. We have to read the instructions and figure out what's even included here before we can figure out what can be done. But I'm really excited, to be honest. I feel like that this is kind of what we've been hoping to have for a long time. And so it's a great moment to have here. And I do think that we should talk more. You know, I think it fits into the next item, but you know, Chris, you mentioned the idea of a dashboard, and I know Dr. Walker, we talked briefly about, you know, what you know, the health department has come up with for the COVID dashboard, and I do think we should have a larger conversation about how we might be able to you know, think about how we're presenting this information in a way that is digestible to people, to the interested parties. Because one thing I think that's great about that COVID dashboard is that it's available during the day when you're sitting there and you're thinking about it, and it's available when I'm sitting on the couch at night and I want to see something. I can look at it anytime I want, and you know, kind of it's live and active. And I think that would be great to get to that kind of place. So we just keep that in your mind, like how are we, because I think that's part of our charge is really to not only just examine this data and present back to the larger body, but also to think about how to make greater transparency about these decisions. And I think that having a dashboard would be a great way to make that happen.
I would just say that to have the data in a dashboard, you have to make sure what the data is representing.
Yes.
Right.
And maybe I missed it sometime in the distant past, so maybe we need to go over it again, but you know, just kind of a diagram of how a youth gets through the justice system.
It's in the next agenda item.
Definition.
we have that for you.
Okay, definition of terms along the way, you know, from you know, contact on the street to arrest, to referral, whatever. I think that if we're all clear on what those terms are, what that means, then you could perhaps dive deeper to see where the areas of injustice might be happening.
Right.
Exactly.
Yeah, and I think that goes to, I'm sorry, and I think that goes to the larger discussion that we've had, and I think with this committee and other ones that I've been on, is the totality of data, not just probation data, but the DA's data, the police's data, everyone, so we can get a clear picture, an idea, so then we can have those difficult conversations of, hey, we know the DA touches basically everyone in the system has been charged and filed on. And so can we take a look at what have you guys done in 2019? Where are the disparities? Where are these referrals coming from? Because we know Richmond has a pretty robust sort of diversion program, so we're not getting many referrals from there. So really trying to get an idea of looking at everyone's data and just not a specific narrow focus of just probation.
Exactly. Yeah.
Absolutely. But I think that in a certain way, by putting out the data that you guys have provided, it will provide a context to see where the missing pieces of data are. And I think that will strengthen our ask of those other groups to provide that data. If there's like a blank box where it goes.
Right.
Right.
I couldn't agree more, Becky, and I've been thinking about what is the data that I have and how can I tell a story with what I have. And some of those boxes are pretty glaring. And so it's a logical place, and hopefully we'll get some more support for that.
Great.
Good.
Should we move along? Is there anything else regarding this right now? We are gonna, the next part has to do with what we're talking about as well. It's not really that separate. Okay, attachment 4, just really quick. This is something that I provided that is basically addendum to the information that probation is providing. And I wasn't able to get it together for the same time period, but I will catch up the next time we meet and we'll be current. But this is for the previous quarter, showing the special ed status in terms of students who have an individualized education plan or a 504 plan. And then also information about the English language fluency proficiency of the students who were detained. So this is in regards to the subset similar to what probation has provided in the one with the infographics in it. The one that starts with the pie chart, this one, but it's not the same month. So you can't compare apples to apples. But if we look back at previous agendas, we had these months. So like I said, I'll be caught up. So next time it will make more sense because you'll see the month next to the month.
So Becky, does this mean then the December data that probation reported on intakes, that number
Can line up with this, it should, yeah.
it lines up, the numbers should theoretically line up, and this speaks to their,
Just more
special ed.
demographic, yeah, more demographic.
more demographics on that population. Okay.
Yes, but the
great.
caveat is that it's not identical because if a student was to come and go over the weekend, they're not included in my data because they never enrolled in school.
Okay, fair
So they're
enough.
not always identical in terms of the number. They have to be enrolled in school in order for me to have their educational record and get this information.
Okay, got it.
Yeah, but we do still include students who are graduates. We still do enroll them in our student information system as we put them like in grade 14, even though they're not in high school. If they're graduates, we still do collect this information about them.
So a grade 14 would represent what, second year of community college?
It just means like that's just how we call them, so we don't get confused. So they're not
Okay.
in 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, or 12. If you're a graduate, then we just put you in there as grade 14 so that we know that, because we still provide school services to them. So yeah, they might be taking community college classes or career technical education classes or other things like that. But we put them in our database so that we have their demographic information because it's connected to their school record. So.
Got it. Okay, thank you.
And it might not match exactly because this is actually, I'm just thinking of another thing, like students are already in our system when they go between the ranch and the hall. So we wouldn't count that person as a new intake. This is just people who are coming in brand new into custody because the school is one school with 2 campuses. So that's another difference.
Okay.
So sorry, it's not going to match exactly,
Okay,
but it does
that's
give you a
okay.
sense of.
It's a good proxy.
It's more information I think that kind of is relevant because I would say the number of, just anecdotally, when I look at our school data, the number of students who have a special education status, the percentage of them has increased over the years.
Yeah.
And also I anecdotally would say that then when you look, the data that's not included in your multi-year data set of like what happened since COVID became part of our lives, that even though there's been a decrease in everybody's level of incarceration, there's actually been an increase in the percentage of Black and brown students who are incarcerated, and as well as English language learners. So I think that says something too about,
Yeah.
advocacy, and so I just think that that's something that is meaningful to look at over time as a supplement to what Melvin and probation are providing. Any questions about that? Okay, so we can move to item number 5. And this is again, this is something that we looked at in this group before, I believe. Is that right, Denise? We
Yes.
did look at it a while ago, but back when we didn't have any actual data to connect to it. So it was a little harder to look at. But the first item there in attachment 5, which is page 19 through 21 in the packet, just talks about a way of looking at data, because of course we all come from different sorts of backgrounds that are all relevant and connected to the youth. But as far as I know, Denise is the only person amongst us who actually is like a researcher about data. So the rest of us, I thought, would benefit from reading some information about how to create research design connected to identifying and assessing racial disparity, much like what Emma Lou, you were asking about, and looking and wondering about the data. So this is a example that comes from the Sentencing Project, which was a large report that was put out a couple of years ago, and just talks about a way to organize that. So this is kind of a background information item there in that item. And then the next attachment, attachment 6, Denise, I'm gonna let you explain this.
Yeah.
Okay.
So this chapter from the Sentencing Project work really speaks to an approach that at various points in a system, assuming there's a sequential steps in this system, that you can assess what the racial disparity is. And it allows you basically to say, oh, is there one at this point? Yes or no. It also allows you to assess, well, given this point, is there a change at the next point? Because if there's no change in between point A and point B, there's no further introduction of a disparity, okay? But if you start at, say, in this case, on figure 1 on page 20, column A, the decision point, the first decision point is arrest. If we have a disparity there, we can say that there is a disparity at arrest point, okay? If that's the first point. If that then continues and it stays at, in this case, the disparity ratio is 2, if it stays at that point, then we know where the disparity has been introduced. We can also see if it goes up or down where the disparity has been maybe mitigated or adjusted. So this is a pretty powerful tool to look at. Obviously, in our process map, there are a lot more places where we could look at this, but this is just a general kind of, I would say, learning tool. But based upon that map,
Can you pause for just 1 second, Denise? Can I just ask? Okay, so I just want to ask a clarifying question to make sure
Sure.
that I'm reading this properly. So when you look at the figure that you cited on page 20,
yes,
in that example, the first thing is the total population. So in this example, 15% of the population are African-American individuals. And then the percentage of people who were arrested were 30%. And so that means that there's where it says 2, basically they're arrested at double the rate
yes,
of their representation in the population.
yes.
And then
And that's a key. However, at every step of the way, you don't go back to that original percentage.
right.
In calculating this, you go back to what was the ratio at, or the percentage at the prior step.
Previous. Right, that's what I wanted to clarify. So then between arrest and detention in this example, the percentage increases a little bit, right? Between 30% and 35. And that's represented by 1.17 times the rate, but that's not compared to their overall population, because that of course would be more than double the population rate.
That's
So
correct.
it's really zeroing in and like looking at the disparity in every interval between the different
At every decision point,
events, at every decision point. So I just,
accounting for the previous step, the
Right.
disparity in the previous step. That's what this does. It sort of takes that out of the equation and says, oh, there's only a 17% disparity at detention
mhm.
among African Americans, adults in this matrix.
Mhm. And looking at that example, you could say that when it gets down to the bottom and you see the conviction rate and then the outcome is either probation or incarceration, there when it's less than 1, that means that they are less likely to be offered probation as an outcome, right?
Exactly.
Okay. I just want to make sure I was reading it properly because it's a lot of
Yeah,
numbers.
you got it. That's
and-
great.
And
Yeah, Bill?
back to the point that Becky made earlier, with regard to the population, even the discussion here in the paragraph above the table indicates that a more reliable assessment would be to use population. In this case, if you're talking about juveniles, to use population of juveniles under 18 years old, not the total population.
Right. That's correct. Yes.
And so is that the example that we're using, or do we know that?
You know, I'm not sure. I haven't read this article in a bit. I'm not sure exactly what that population is, but you're absolutely right. The comparison has to be for a comparable group. You can't
Right,
say the
right.
entire general population, but you can say the general population of adults 18 and above, or, you know, of transition age youth, 18 to 25, things along those lines.
Right.
Yeah.
Great. Okay. Any other questions from any members of the group? Or
Okay.
from the public? Okay, Denise, next step.
Okay. The next one is page 22, and this is, again, this is stuff that we have presented in the past. So, basically, this is a racial disparity matrix that I created, drawing from our county's data on the DOJ website. So this is all public domain data, basically. And one of the options that they allow you to do is to download data by race. And you can get arrests by racial group, you can get whether or not complaints were sought, or whether the individual was released overall. And so these decision points don't necessarily match up to the matrix from the chapter, but it still gives us a sense of what's going on. So in 2019, in our county, approximately 10% of the population, and Bill, I can't quite remember if I did this for adults or not, but the point is still the same, that it's needs to be representative of the population that you're comparing to. So approximately 10% of the population is African American, 26% is Latinx, 65% white. When you then look at arrests overall, 18%, almost 19% are among African Americans, which is almost twice the rate of African Americans in the general population. So again, here we go. We have a disparity ratio of almost 2. When you go across, you can see that the percentage of Latinx who are arrested overall is about 26%. and the Latinx disparity ratio is essentially 1. So 1 basically means there's nothing going on here. It's the same thing. If it's over 1, substantially over 1, that means something's going on in a negative direction. And if it's under 1, it also means something's going on. So there's really no disparity with the Latinx population among adults in this county in 2019 surrounding arrests.
Can I ask a question, Denise?
Yeah,
Isn't that kind of, I'm only questioning what you just said, because when I worked in another county that had a much smaller African-American population, there was a much larger disparity in our Latinx communities, incarceration and different things like that. And when I looked at the numbers, I'm always looking at our school numbers, but I guess what I'm trying to say is that because of the intense disparity that is happening with the African-American population, doesn't that sort of mask what's happening with the Latinx community in regards to, like, if, let's just say that for the sake of this mathematical argument, there was no African-American column and you were only comparing the Latinx community to the white community, then they would look to be disproportionate compared to the white community. And I guess that is represented because the white community is at less than 1, right?
exactly.
But like, there is really no like proper rate of incarceration, right? So it's like to say like they're incarcerated at the proper rate, like it's all
Exactly.
relative to the other groups.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, it is. And, you know, I mean, the assumption would be that there would be, that individual communities would offend or, you know, have charges brought against them in a way that is equal to their distribution in the population.
Yeah, I
Right.
think I was just responding to, you said when there's nothing going on when you look at the Latino column. That was just, I just had a little pause there.
Okay.
Mathematically, there's nothing going on, but but they
Right.
still.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay.
No, you're absolutely right. Okay, and then moving forward, taking off further from what Becky's comment is, when we look at the white population, you can see, you know, an inverse relationship, so that white adults are substantially less likely, they're half as likely to be arrested. Yeah. Okay. We can then take this, and what I did with this then, so that's arrests overall. I then looked at and disaggregated the arrests by felony and misdemeanors. And if you go across on the felonies row for the general population arrests, what you'll see is 38% of the felony arrests are among African Americans, which leads to a over 4.0 disparity. So 4 times more likely compared to their presence in the general population. The Latinx population, slightly below 1. I mean, I would interpret that as there's really no difference in how likely a Latinx community member is going to be arrested compared to their presence or their distribution in the population. And then when we look at the percentage white, once again, the pattern is the same, where white adults are, you know, more than half is likely to be arrested, or less than half is likely to be arrested compared to their distribution in the general population. So this overall arrests, the numbers above for aggregate of arrests and misdemeanors, are really masking a larger disparity of severity in felony arrests among African Americans in this county.
So Denise, would it be mathematically correct then to say that for the felony row, that a Latinx person is 2 times more likely to be charged with a felony than a white person in that group? And that an African-American person is like 8 times more likely than the white?
I'm gonna have to think on that because
Okay.
the disparity ratios are based upon the prevalence of their distribution in the population as opposed to comparing back and forth.
Right.
But I think what you could, I think what you could say is the disparity is twice as high among the Latin. I think actually you can accept that. It sends the message that Latinx is higher when in reality there is no disparity. In my interpretation of this data, there is no disparity with the Latinx population given this data.
Okay.
So does that make sense? Because the comparison is
I know there's some mathematical danger of comparing ratios. It's not.
right.
So I
Right.
just wanna-
And really, does it sends I don't know that it sends the message that we want, because when you say that it's twice as high, it sends a message that there's a problem. And what, I think maybe a more effective way of saying that, or a more meaningful way, would be to say that there is no disparity ratio in the Latin community. Further, the disparity among whites is half of what it is. And so to say, oh, well, that's really beneficial.
I think
Or
what
whites.
stands out too is what you said about how the severity, those African-American people who are arrested are charged at felonies, that is what stands out, right? That might be the most remarkable piece of information in there.
Yeah.
Let's see, Emma Lou asked a question in the chat. Does general population data on the table on page 22 include adults? I think, is this based on the adult data or is this juvenile data?
This is based upon adult data because
Yeah.
I have not had access to DOJ data for youth. This is all adults, and it's what I could readily access just to see what was going on in our neighborhood, to sort of provide a concrete example of what we know in our county.
Great. Any questions or comments about this from the body?
Jonathan has a hand up.
Oh, hey, Jonathan. Yeah.
Hi, so in terms of this notion of making sure everything is considered in context, I have a question or maybe an observation. So for misdemeanors, you noted that the disparity ratio is 0.71, but rather than celebrating that and saying, oh, it looks like the police are less likely to arrest an African-American for a misdemeanor, wouldn't it be fair to say that an African-American is more likely to be charged with a felony? And that's why the misdemeanor number, which looks good, it's less than 1, actually reflects a real problem.
Right, that's similar to like what was in the example table where the outcome with probation was less and incarceration was higher, right? So like the way in which they're being charged, because the overall group of people who are arrested is a larger disproportionate group. And so the fact that that there's fewer, yeah, I hear what you're saying, Jonathan. I don't have really good words to explain it, but yeah.
Yeah, I think it's always tricky in describing and documenting this. I tend to, want to double and triple check and have other organizations and individuals look at what I do, because I can read this stuff rather literally as an epidemiologist by my training, I can just rattle off what it means, but the context really matters. And that's why having, you know, all of your perspective on this, and this is why Melvin and I are not sharing, you know, other data surrounding the youth. We need to have a better sense of what this is. And, you know, interpreting it means it's a big aspect of this work.
Well, I think we have a good thing to look into. And I did, one time I went to a presentation in regards to school data from a professor at UCLA where they talked about this. I'll have to look back and see if I can find that information, because I remember that caution of being careful of comparing ratios. I do remember that stuck out to me because we also
Right.
report data for school in a similar sort of way, so.
Well, and we always have comparison groups. And what is the comparison group? I mean,
Right.
the comparison group here is the percentage of that group's background in the population. And so, you know, what does it mean to have a 10% versus 26% versus 65%? What does that mean? It just is, right?
Okay, anything else about this? Dr. Walker, did you want to ask?
Yeah, I would just say that this section that you included from the manual references other parts of the manual. Is this a big thick manual? What is this?
No, Bill, I'm happy to send you the full report. I think we did in the, what was it? I think it was the October, November meeting, we sent the full report. And I didn't do it this time because I didn't think it was necessary, but if you'd like the full report, I'm happy to put it out there again.
Yeah, I could go back and find it, but if you could send it, that'd be better. Yeah.
Okay,
I would just add to Becky's point about comparing ratios. I think what she was trying to get at, right, is looking at this matrix, we don't want to suggest, I don't think it's the point of anyone within this group, within the subcommittee, or within the body that there should be more arrests of white people, right? Which is what it could seem like when you look at the disparity ratio and say, well, they're at about half as opposed to 1, which would indicate evenness, right? But more like whatever is happening such that that ratio looks the way that it does, is there some similar stance that we could take among other ethnic groups? And so I think it's more about that overall takeaway, because again, getting into the weeds of trying to compare the numbers directly to each other could be problematic. But I think the overall takeaway would be if it's lower than 1 in one ethnic group, what we don't want to say is, hey, you should arrest more of them. We want to say in other communities of color where there is even a 1 ratio, which would seem to I think you guys get the point of what I'm trying to say. I'm not going to overtalk it, but that's essentially, I think, what Becky
Yeah,
is getting at.
exactly.
And I think we want to make sure we carry that takeaway forward.
yeah, I was kind of thinking like exactly what you were saying, and that's why I was trying to make it so that if you consider whatever's happening within the white population to be, as opposed to considering just whatever the average is as what is, you know, there is no correct, right? It's not like we're trying to raise up the amount of incarceration at all. So
Right.
we don't have to rehash it. Yes, I agree with you, and that is what I was trying to say.
It's just making sure we compare apples with apples. That's all.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Okay, anything else about this graphic? Okay, I feel like I have my teacher hat on. I've been almost got through my lesson plan here. We got oh, Cheryl has her hand up. Hi, Cheryl.
Hi. So I'm not that kind of researcher, but I am a scientist. So I'm going to tell you, my research is different. My research is on is at a cellular level. I'm a biologist, microbiologist. I'm going to tell you that this research is difficult to look at from that aspect. And you can't compare apples to apples no matter what. You can't compare the numbers for the white community, for the numbers for the Black community, to the Latin community, to the indigenous community. You just can't. Factors that are affecting why young Black men are being arrested so much different from why young non-Black boys are being arrested, why young Latinos are being arrested, why young indigenous or other young men of color are being arrested. So there is no comparing apples to apples or orange to orange. So you can't compare it that way. And so no matter how much we may try and say, why are these children 9 to 16 being arrested of this particular cultural group, and why these children of this other cultural group are being arrested and why these other ones are not, it's not that simple. And that's why we're looking at the data. We have to look at the cultural impact of why these officers are seeing these children as dangerous in this particular cultural group, and or why they're not considering dangerous when they're white children. So that is why we're trying to give this data. And spoke to the Chiefs group yesterday. Was it yesterday, Christopher? I forgot. My days are gone. But we're trying to drill down to find out what is causing these disparities. And it's much more than, oh, they're white or they're Black or they're Latino or indigenous or Asian or whatever. Something else that is causing these disparities besides the fact that they're just in this group. There is some inbred bias, and I didn't say unconscious. There is some inbred conscious bias that is happening at each step of the way of a race system that is in this incarceral system that says this one is considered bad, or this one is considered more likely to be, who needs to be in this carceral system, and this one we're going to give a chance not to be. That is where we need to tackle this. So we can keep going round and round and round and talk around the real issues, or we can get to the heart of the matter. And this data is showing us that something is broken. And we are trying to fix what's broken, but we can't fix what's broken if we keep trying to think that this is an apples to apples or orange to orange comparison. It is not. It is not. And our social dynamic is showing us that it is not. I would like to see us use this data in our other committees as well to try and get to the heart of the matter. And I know, Ms. Becky, you see this in the school system. I know that all of us see it in all of our systems, and the intersectionality of it is telling us that we're losing this battle. So let's stop trying to put this circle into this triangle and try and use this data to our advantage. Thank you.
Yeah, Cheryl, thank you for sharing. I appreciate you bringing us back to our purpose at hand. It is definitely not about just numbers swimming on a page. And I think that sometimes preparing the data and looking at the data can help to remind and bolster those who are skeptical. But I think that in this group of people, we're not skeptical of what the data shows. We know it already, but to provide it in this way, in a way that people can understand, can sometimes just help to strengthen our cause with those who are skeptical. But I agree with you wholeheartedly. It's not about just simply being part of a group. It's a whole, intersectional combination of factors, and they're not going to be changed or persuaded by the numbers on the page. But sometimes, that is our charge, is to try to examine that. And yeah, for school, of course, we have the same sort of issues, and we went through the same process, with this whole No Child Left Behind, where we did all kinds of testing and all this and that. And a lot of it was just to show what we already knew, that Black and brown kids were not being well served by our public school system. We knew that before we did all of that. But it took that kind of data to be presented to make real change, because people were doubting, even though it was as clear as day to the parents of the children who were being sent to school. So I appreciate you bringing us back to our purpose. Thank you, Cheryl. Very well said. Anything else before we move on to our last attachment here? Okay, so this is what we were talking about earlier when Emily, you were saying like, what are all the different things? And when we were talking about, and Dr. Walker was saying, where are all the different points? This is, I was reminded that this had been shared early on about the different decision points in the juvenile justice process flow. And we thought it would be good to take the information that we've just presented and have a conversation about what is available, what we have, and where we, where we still need to make additional asks from different organizations to fill in our picture of the whole process, and just kind of talk through that. So this graphic, which is page 23 of the packet, just talks about the different steps in there. And, I think we can say that we have a lot of this from what Denise presented earlier. And I will say that I'm working on our countywide expelled plan, and I have all the expulsion data from the school system from the past 3 years. Every 3 years we put together a countywide school expulsion plan, but I had not yet presented the data to the school districts before we had to put the agenda into the docket. And so I wasn't able to do it this time. I wanted to make sure I presented everything to the stakeholders before I brought it to you guys. But I did have that meeting with all the school districts on Friday. And so when we meet again, I will be sure to provide information disaggregated by a lot of different things. I have it disaggregated both, it's organized by school district and then disaggregated by race and also by socioeconomic status in terms of it, whether students are qualify for free and reduced lunch, also by foster and homeless status, and a couple other different things I believe are in that. I'll have to look and check, but basically looking at, and also by grade, the most important thing I think actually is actually looking by grade band and by distribution of race and ethnicity by district. So I have that information, and I will, I'm putting together the whole report that goes to the state. It'll have to be there by June. So I won't have the whole report in April, but I'll have that first data so that we can look at in terms of exclusionary school discipline in our expulsion data. And then the next point in there would be the police contact, which it sounds like we do have that included, we think, in the data that was presented. That's correct, right?
Yes.
Okay, and then out of that, a subset of that, of course, is the arrest data. Is that able to be teased out, or is it only whether people were cited and detained or cited and released? Like our police, when they're making a contact but not arresting somebody, that's in there?
I think,
We think so.
we think so, but this is where I really have to have a bunch more time with the data that I haven't had yet
I hear
to
you.
answer some of these questions. I believe it does, but I don't want to, I need to go through and clean it up and take a look at it. But I'm pretty sure there's cite and releases in there.
So that next step, we definitely have, the students who are, the youth who are detained. And then when we get to the next step, do we need more information from the DA about what the actual petition filed is, or is that in the offense structure part of that?
We have that.
That is in there, isn't it? Yes. Okay. And then the outcome of the detention hearing either being that they are released or that they are detained.
We have that.
We have that. And then at the jurisdictional hearing, what comes out of that is the disposition. So we have that as well, right?
Yes, we have that.
Do we have that even when people are, like, for example, given a placement order?
Out-of-home placement. Oh, we have an out-of-home placement variable. So I know that whether the individual is detained or detained at home or on monitoring devices. So we have that. It's not as detailed, I think, as some of the detail that we have in for our population. But it's we could maybe link it up. But we do have broad categories there.
So it does seem that we kind of have at least some data for every step of the way along the process.
I think that is correct, and I'm sorry to hedge you guys. I'm really sorry, but for me, this data is very complicated, and I have not had the time to really sink my teeth into it. Malcolm and I just talked about it, some of the early demographics last week, and so I want to go through and confirm that, and my hope would be to report back on it for next month.
Yeah, no, I don't think
And
anybody
at
feels
least
like you're
have,
hedging. You just gave us a very large meal to digest right here.
I know, but
I think it's helpful to share, even just to share the file structure, even before we have the data, so to try to kind of digest that, it takes a lot, so.
it does. So, and as I said, some of the data elements are empty. So that's what I haven't had a chance to do, is to go through every single data element, understand how things are linked together. What is the story that is told by a set of records for an individual, so that I can say, oh, right, we have the outcome on the jurisdictional hearing. The charges were found true. I'm pretty sure we have it, but I have to.
Right,
I have to have confidence, and I don't yet have that.
Yeah.
So.
Great. Anything else about this from the committee or from the public?
I think now might be as good a time as any to add to Melvin's point earlier and Cheryl's earlier, right, about the meeting that we had yesterday, Melvin's earlier point about getting data from more than just probation. We did go to the Police Chiefs Association meeting yesterday, with Cheryl and myself, to request race, ethnicity, gender, geography, offense data from them as often as we could get it, so that we could analyze it for patterns, trends, and get a sense of, from that perspective, where to go from there, what action steps we needed to take, so on and so forth. Overall, I think the meeting, or at least our part of the meeting, went well. We were asked some questions like, could you help us with resources to cover, what it's going to take for us to do this, among other issues about getting geographic location data, which of course we would want in order to figure out where a program should be housed, or what existing community-based organizations, et cetera, we could partner with, right, in a particular location, so that the folks in that area who would be eligible for those programs can get to them. But overall, I think the place that we left it all was that they want to check in about ARIES, the ARIES data system or database, which I think is what the county sheriffs use, to figure out if there's some way for them to use that system, as opposed to everyone having to, sort of generate their own report, so that we have a uniform set of information to work with. And that sounds like it could be at least a promising place for them to start, to figure out if that's even possible. And if not, then it would be, again, on each individual agency to try to get that information to us as best they can. However, all that being said, clearly it's going to require some level of follow-up, right? Either they have the conversations that they need to have, and then we probably will need to monitor the situation and check back in to figure out, if there's been any progress, where we stand, and how far away we may be from actually receiving data from them. So that is something we're going to want to monitor and keep an eye on, stay on top of, because I think with a meeting like that, with police chiefs like that, it's not easy to be chief of police, right? A lot of things come across your desk. It could get pushed down, right? Really, really quickly, not necessarily because folks don't want to do it, but because a whole bunch of other things come up. And so it is something that I think we're going to need to continue to reach out about every so often. And the last thing that I would say is, of course, this subcommittee meets on a monthly basis. So I was pushing, for that. I was like, hey, we meet on a monthly basis. We'd love to get something every month if you can do that. And the response that we got was it would be a lot easier if we could do it quarterly, which of course, at least to start, we would take. I have no idea, certainly don't have any reason to believe that that would sync up with our quarterly meetings as a body. Would be really, smooth if it did, so that everybody kind of gets a chance to look at it at the same time as soon as we get it. But I'm guessing that the months will probably be a little bit off if that does happen soon. So that the data subcommittee will probably end up looking at this first and having the first stab at sort of asking questions or getting clarification before the body looks at it at the next quarterly meeting. But that was sort of my reflection from the meeting. I see Denise wants to say something, and Cheryl, since she was part of the presentation with me as well. I don't know if you want to.
Yeah, Chris, thanks for the highlights of yesterday's meeting. I really appreciate that. I had been invited, I guess, as an ORJ member to be, I would say, a fly on the wall during the meeting, and so I operated in that way. And my sense from where we ended last year was that the sheriff's office had suggested ARIES, and that the ARIES database covered all the police departments and law enforcement agencies in the county, but the sheriff was hesitant to turn that over to us without getting permission from the police chiefs. So if the police chiefs, and what I also heard Assistant Sheriff Caston say yesterday was that if you send me a letter authorizing me this, or give us some kind of a written document that says, hey, I authorize you, Sheriff Livingston, to send this data to the RJOB or to the ORJ, that they would be willing to do that. And I think that's where it stands, or that's where I understood it to be. And maybe not everybody will do that, but that's it. To me, it ended right where I thought it was going, other than the quarterly data. But the other thing I want to point out is, just because they provide us, or we get provided this ARIES data, I'm not expecting the sheriff's office to do any summary analysis. They're probably going to give us a file of all the records and contacts. And so that is going to take some time for us to look at, clean, understand. So we may or may not have something on a quarterly basis from them. It's just when they get it to us, how long will it take us? And when I say us, I think I'm speaking me, to get to that and, summarize it in a way that's meaningful for us to sink our teeth into.
And just a quick question on that. I'm assuming that, once Denise breaks down the data and all of that, that the sheriff, that they're going to want to see it before it gets produced as well? Or how did you guys have any discussion on that? Because I know from, and speaking for the chief, if we were to release them, if we were going to send data to someone to analyze it, we would probably want to take a look at it before it actually then goes out, to make sure we got to clean up any questions or anything like that. So I don't know if that came out at your meeting yesterday, Chris, of, hey, yep, this is how we're going to send it, but we'd like to give final approval of what is actually going to be presented.
Well, I will say, Melvin, that in my work with the sheriff's office with other data, and even with the ORJ community report, I have always given the document back to the sheriff's office representative. It was Christine, now it's Jody, now it would be Melissa, to say, here, this is what I've created, and please, provide your input. And I think it's really important because, again, I am not an expert in criminal justice. I can do the numbers, but you guys have the context. And so if I'm documenting this and representing it in a way that's not accurate, I would like to know that the Sheriff's Department is in support of what we're doing. And so I don't know that it came up explicitly yesterday, Chris, not from my perspective, but Melissa, I would like your office to know that that's what I would prefer to do. And maybe we put a time limit on it and say, I'll give you, this is what I have. Can you please look at it give it a week, and then we're going to post it unless you have comments or concerns.
Yeah, and certainly probably to Melvin's point, it may, and I was not at the meeting yesterday, but it may include not only review from the sheriff's office, but the individual agencies as well, which I think is what he was referring to, which could potentially, it would be another review process that could take more time.
Right.
But certainly I can keep this group updated on that progress. If that was the last thing from the undersheriff, just saying, hey, I'm going to need authorization from each agency, I can certainly keep this group updated on the progress of that. And then, what other review steps are going to be part of this. But I think that probably also speaks to monthly versus quarterly reports, is if there are those levels of review, monthly would likely be tough to do.
Right.
Because it will be a lot of data.
It will be. And I think the other thing is I'm not sure that we're looking at data disaggregated by specific police department. So that might, attenuate any kind of fears that the local chiefs might have if we're looking at this data in an aggregated form. Although we do hope to have some kind of geographic aspect to it, but
I see that Shayla, you had your hand up, and so does, and Cheryl now does too, but Shayla, you had your hand up first. Did you have something to say?
I was just gonna say, because we did a report, Secretary did a report last year, and we collected data from El Cerrito, Antioch, Pittsburgh, San Pablo, and they didn't require us or request that we, after we analyze the data, that we, check in with them. However, some things did come up where we noticed patterns where a lot of charges were like for outstanding warrants and things like that. So we did question about that just to get clarification on writing the report. So I just wanted to just throw that out there. Like, they didn't require us to check in with them first before publishing our report. However, they did want to keep us in the loop because, especially for, I think it was Pittsburgh, who was the chief there, had wanted to hear what kind of recommendations we were going to propose, and how he could, partner with us to see how we can help, specifically with racial disparities and biases. So I just wanted to throw that out there. And also, just to give an update, I do have a meeting with Vera Institute on Monday to see where they are with their process too. So hopefully we can get some stuff from them.
Ooh, we're going to put you on the agenda for next month, Shayla.
Yeah, Shayla, will you reach out to me and let me know if you do have something to put on the agenda? Because we'd love to have an update about that. That would be wonderful.
Absolutely. I'll let you know Monday. I have a meeting with them at 3, I think. So.
Great.
And before we go to Cheryl, Becky, I just wanted to comment on Shayla's comments. Yeah. I think it's very possible that some chiefs will not have a problem, just as you said. However, I think it's really, really good practice and collegiality to offer and to, to make it be as transparent as possible and to give our stakeholders basically an opportunity to comment. And, they may very well say no, thank you, and great, but I think we need to ask.
Yeah, I agree.
I would just say that a parallel to that is that, we have the public school board dashboard, and always before they release new information on there, they give the districts and LEAs and county offices like private preview access. So thinking like way down the line, there's a way where you can kind of publish information privately, right? Where you have to have an access code before you release it, so that the entities can go in and make sure there aren't any reporting errors. I mean, I think that's more, there's the issue of like building the trust that we're going to do it responsibly, but then there's also just to make sure that, like we didn't accidentally, leave off a 0 or do something like that. And I would just say also that maybe the process might be a little extra complicated in the beginning, but once we are clear about what we are reporting and how it's being reported and where the files are coming from and all of that, it might not be as complicated in an ongoing fashion, So I think that just to consider that too. So Cheryl, did you have something else you wanted to add?
Yes. Hold on a second. Hold on. Couple things. I think it's extremely generous of you, Denise, to offer to do that, but I wouldn't offer too fast. This is their responsibility. And that is what we gave them yesterday. And that is what we told them. They can figure it out. They can figure it out. They can figure out how to arrest people and put them in jail. They can figure out how to report that they've arrested people and put them in jail. So this is their responsibility to tell us how many people are where and who is where. And so they already came to that conclusion at the end that they were going to work together to figure out how they were going to do it and approach the county to ask for the resources. So I think you ought to hold back for a moment and before you start volunteering and let them try and figure it out. Because they did say that they would work together and that they would come up with a solution to how to do it. If Little Richmond can do it, then the rest of them can figure it out. That's number one. Number two, I think we have to be careful that we don't skirt the line between keeping people apprised and transparency and giving people an opportunity to massage information that is public information. I like the idea of keeping people of being transparent, but as with any information that you provide to the public, you have to be transparent. Yes, you want to provide them information to see, is this report okay to give out? We are going to be reporting this information, but you don't give people enough time to change information. If you want to change the way it's being presented, that's one thing, but don't let numbers get changed. Don't let the core of information get changed. The validity of the information, it has to still be there. We still have to maintain the integrity of the information that is being presented to the public. If we want to change the way it's being presented, that's one thing, but changing what is being presented is quite another. So I think that that's a very tight line that we have to walk. And that is what I would be more concerned about when you give someone, when you open up that door and we are the ones who have to explain to the public, wait a minute, you gave it to the sheriff's office or whoever 10 days ago, and now you're giving it to us? What has been changed? What did you give them? And what are we seeing? So we have to be careful with that. And the last thing I will say, and thank you, Christopher, is that when we presented it to them, yes, they talked about, we don't have resources, we don't keep this kind of data, we don't have to start reporting for 2 more years into 2023. Well, why do you wait till then, till you have to start reporting it? When there are many people, Sir Melvin included, the juvenile justice system keeps track of it now. Richmond keeps track of it now. There are entities around the county who are already being proactive in reporting things. So why are you going to wait until the very last minute, which tells us that you don't want to? Why not? Why don't we start and we ask that everybody starts doing the same thing? I don't care if it's in Aries. I don't care if you use an abacus. You can mark it on 5 strikes on a wall, for all I care, and you can count on people's toes. Just give us the information and let us know so we can figure out where the disparities are. They agreed at the end that we all have the same goal to be able to not have these disparities. That is what they said at the end. They said we were all in the same, we were all headed for the same goal. So if we are all headed for the same goal, then this should not be a difficult thing to do. And at the end, they agreed that they would work together. They would talk to Chief French and see what it is she's doing. And maybe that they can come to a good way that they can either find ways in their budget and ask the county to pay for the other half. So I think that that's what we want to sit back and see what they can do on their own. And then we can find ways to support them. Thank you.
Yeah, makes sense for sure. We don't want to offer more than we need to if they are willing to give that. I know how strapped you are, Denise, especially without being fully staffed over there. So
Yeah, and that was the thing. And I just want to echo what Cheryl, because the part of my concern is we're going to be, and this is we as in Denise, ORJ, under the probation umbrella, reporting out on other jurisdictions' data. That concerns me, because when a lot of questions start to come up and people start going on the attack, it's going to be probation being attacked for someone else's data that we're just presenting. So I just want to, throw that out there, and I'll definitely bring it up to, Chief Krause of, hey, do you really want to take this on? Because here, this is the potential fallout. Just like I wouldn't think she would want other agencies reporting out on probation data. Right, it's our data.
Yeah.
We should be the ones held to the fire. We should be the ones answering the questions. And in this case, when you're looking at the law enforcement agencies, I'm really with Cheryl that, hey, we don't have the budget to do it. This is what we're doing. You guys figure out a way, send somebody, report out on your data. So then when people have questions, we know where the target is. And then Denise overall can look at, hey, how does this play into the probation data and where all this other stuff that we're trying to figure out, and where do we go from there? But just their bubble of data, I really think they should be the ones that are showing up and presenting.
and as was pointed out, they have to be ready to do that in 2 years anyway, so they might as well build the capacity now, right? I mean, it's not like we're asking them to do something completely fantastical that won't be their responsibility quite soon. So why not do it now? Definitely agree myself. So, okay, anything more for the good of the order? Okay, well then I think we can adjourn the meeting at 4:55, and our next meeting is April 22nd at 3 p.m.
Great.
Ladies,
Thanks,
enjoy the
everyone.
rest of your International Women's Month. Enjoy
Yeah.
the last of it.
Great meeting, Becky. Thank
Yeah,
you.
you too, everybody. Thank you so much for all of your
This was
attention.
really- Yeah,
We're making good progress for sure. Great, thank you, everybody.
bye.